Good morning. Well, before we kick off today, there's a couple of things I want to say. One is to all of our listeners across the world, those of you in New Zealand in particular, congratulations and thank you for your tuning into the podcast. We, in the last month, have hit the top 20 podcasts in New Zealand. So thank you to all the listeners in New Zealand. Also, a big shout out to those of you over in the States who are going through, and the UK. I understand it's a very, very difficult time where you are right now. And my heart and our hearts go out to you. Can't really imagine how horrible it must be where you are, given what you're dealing with. I think if one thing, we've been pretty blessed here in Australia to somehow be somewhat contained. I mean, we haven't avoided it, but certainly when we look around the world, I think it's easy to see that there are people over there who are doing it, really tough. I also want to welcome those of you. This is your first time listening to the podcast. Welcome. Thank you for being here. You're at the beginning of what I'm going to say is a really exciting time to be tuning into the podcast. If you've not listened to any previous episodes, you're welcome to go back, look through the feed. This is about our 55th episode now. We talk with a host of people who have a deep expertise in certain areas that contribute to leadership, and it can range from CEOs, entrepreneurs, founders, thought leaders, aspiring leaders, academics, even sports people. And so what my interest is in serving you is to provide you with the backstory and the insights and the journey and the struggles and the lessons and the successes of all these people who typically we would look at and say, oh my God, these people must have their shit together. And then we make some decision about ourselves that we really don't have what it takes, or certainly that we compare ourselves with decisions about what we think we do or do not have. And in my opinion, that really is an illusion that prevents us from realizing our own potential as leaders. Now, I'm absolutely thrilled today to bring in a guest that has accepted an invitation from me to join us for a total of 5 weeks, because she is an expert in helping people deal with one of the major stresses that gets in the way of our success as an entrepreneur, and that's finances. In fact, if you look at stress itself, every single one of us deals with a lot of stress, and there are 4 main areas that influence stress. Money is at the top of the list, and in fact, it's been at the top of the list for the last 12 years. Kitty, not only does she help people specifically deal with that, getting them out of debt, but the thing that I'm really fascinated in talking to Kitty today about is this thing around shame, and what shows up as the major obstacle to dealing with our financial situation, whatever that looks like, because of our embarrassment and the shame and anxiety that comes with that. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Those of you who are watching the video recording of this on YouTube, you will clearly see I'm not even in my work attire yet. I didn't make it that far. And so the first thing that I'm in dealing with myself this morning is my own level of embarrassment and shame, having made a commitment twice to Kitty about jumping onto this podcast. And on both occasions, I totally effed it up, right? And so the first thing I've had to attend to, and God bless Kitty, because Kitty is one of the things that's great about Kitty is she's spent 25 years in personal development and leadership coaching. She brings all of that experience plus a wealth of experience in running other businesses, where she's worked with people like Sir Richard Branson and big name bands, and like outstanding, phenomenal person, right? So God bless her, despite me screwing it up on her and being 30 minutes late to a time she doesn't even come into the office, and I forgot about the bloody call. So, of course, I'm putting myself out there to be really, I want to bring this up because clearly what gets triggered in that situation is, at the end of the day, we're all freaking human, and we cannot change what we've done in the past. We cannot undo what we've done. We can absolutely take responsibility and, apologize and request forgiveness and deal with the impact of that breakdown. But the thing that there is then to deal with is to say, okay, what can I do now if I was to look at what I did do, what worked and what didn't work, that I can change in the future. Now, clearly, I've given my promise to Kitty to deal with that for myself, because this is not a new thing for me. But today, as we talk about finances, and in specifically with Kitty about the work she does to help people apply this in the area of finances, we are going to start to talk about what does it take in order for us to deal with and share authentically about the blame and the guilt and the embarrassment that we deal with in the area of finances. And I am going to kick it off with asking Kitty to share with you about her particular journey into the area of finances, because she didn't start out there. It is from her personal experience. And I just want to highlight before we do that, Kitty's now running an organisation. She's the founder of a company called Debt Angel Solutions. She has a huge team of people who are committed to transforming the conversation around finance, and they have been helping hundreds of people not only get out of debt, but to change the trajectory of their financial future and giving them an access to financial freedom. So, Kitty, thank you for your generosity this morning and for being here in the face of all of that stuff and making it work. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I have to say, Carly, you are just a gorgeous human being. Like, for you to go, oh, whoops, get yourself together, put yourself in front of this session and get ready for it. You look gorgeous. You always look gorgeous, and you are gorgeous. And thank you for the difference that you're making to everybody. And thank you for that intro too.
Oh, you're very welcome. Now, let's get stuck into it. So you were not always in the finance industry. I want to be clear about that. But what you're doing is remarkable from a very deep level of personal experience when you set out in your early 20s. Do you want to share with us a bit about what was happening back then and what you were up to in the world?
Yeah, sure. So in my early 20s, I actually, I think I've always been an entrepreneur of sorts. And in my early 20s, I wasn't sure where I was going to go. I'd just finished school. I'd come back from overseas. I just didn't know what to do. So I was actually given a job by a friend of mine working at the wharves in Sydney underneath the Harbour Bridge, where the Chicago ships came in. And, it was great money. And, I didn't care much for a career there. I was just looking for the money. Anyway.
I don't know. The view sounds pretty amazing. No, working under the Harbour Bridge. Can you believe that? Wow.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
My office was actually looking out at the bridge and Luna Park. It was incredible. Anyway, so I was working in this role, and one of the wharfies said, "Hey, listen, come with me and I'll explain to you what these containers are and what you're processing." And I went, "Okay." And I was actually doing a leadership program at the time, which is all about what you say becomes your reality. What you speak, you can create, right? Anyway, he took me for a drive and he's like, "This is a 20-foot container and a 40-foot container." And he said, "This is where I got to think." And he drove me through this massive shed. Literally, it was just a shed with like big open doors, 10 by 10. Lots of them. It was huge. And out the other side, and there in front of me was Luna Park and the Harbour Bridge. And I just went, oh my gosh. And I'd done events, been in events for a while. And I went, I'm going to put a party on here. And as soon as I said it, I went, uh-oh. Now I'm going to have to do that. How am I going to do that? So literally he drove me back. We got back to the main area where receivable and delivery was. Here I march upstairs to the management, and there was a dispute between management and wharfies and the unions, and this wasn't done. Anyway, I knocked on the door of the general manager, and a man with no hair and one arm turned around. He said, "Yes." And I said, "Hi, you don't know me. My name's Kitty, and I work downstairs in receivable and delivery, and I want to put a party on in Shed 3. And he looked at me and he went, "Okay, get me a proposal." And I went, "Okay." And I backed out the door. And I just met a lady who I was very interested in being in business with and doing events with. And so I called her all excited and told her, and we went up, as soon as I finished work, we went up and we met with some friends of hers that worked on, that basically ran half of Oxford Street at the time. Anyway, a couple of hours later, I came back with a check, walked back into this gentleman's office, put a check for $2,000 on the table and went, "Here's your proposal." And we went from there. We basically started to put on big events. We put on huge events. Some of them were absolutely ginormous. It was before ticketing regulations were in place. We did like 10,000 people dance parties with some of the biggest names on the planet. We did Jamiroquai. We did 2,500, 3,000 people sit down dinners. It was incredible.
Wow.
And my favorite was when we launched Virgin Atlantic with Richard Branson. And
wow.
we built in the shed this plane, like it was the first class plane, right? So we built it out of jumping castle material and hot air balloon material. And he just walked in and got down on his hands and knees and went, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible."
Wow. What an experience,
Oh,
right? I mean, oh my God. I mean, I'm old enough, obviously, to think back and remember that time. As a first thing, but I do remember, now that you mention that, I quite remember the time when he did do that. All the excitement and the very electrifying experience, I think, is what I'm present to, that was around that time. Like, what an amazing experience.
it was incredible. He was my idol, always had been, and to actually meet him and have him be so in awe of what we had created in this space. And I'm a bit of an opportunist, so I actually knew that the space was up for development. It had been there for 100 years or whatever it was, and the government, it wasn't making as much money as it could for the government. So the lease for the wharves were up, and I walked up to Richard Branson and said, "I'd like you to back me in developing these 22 hectares of land."
Wow.
It was.
You are definitely an opportunist.
it was, and I was so like, this has got to be like, it's such a beautiful opportunity. Anyway, long story short, a photographer actually took a photo of us at the event, and I was really upset about it because it was like really sassy. He was feeding me noodles with chopsticks. I'm like, oh my goodness. Anyway, I put it together as a proposal, and I thought I've got to say something witty. And anyway, I put global leaders eating up opportunity on the cover of this, and met with him when he was next in town, which is about a month or two later. And he unfortunately wasn't able to develop the land because he's not in property development. He's in trouble. But anyway, he sent me this gorgeous email and acknowledged me and thanked me and told me who to talk to. But shortly after that, and to be honest, that statement, global leaders eating up opportunity, really pulled me up for the last 20 years. To make a declaration like that to him has really, been a big calling card for me.
Absolutely.
But shortly after that, I had this experience with another promoter, and the promoter unfortunately just got the feeling that they hadn't sold enough tickets. And you can feel the buzz when there's a big party, and you couldn't feel it. So I asked him to show me the ticket sales, because as I said before, ticketing regulation wasn't in place, so you couldn't just go online and check like you can now what the sales were. And he couldn't show me. And I said to him, listen, if you can't show me what the ticketing sales are, we're covering the cost of the establishment and setup of the venue. You guys are bringing the people. We haven't brought most of that stuff in yet, but we've brought some in. And if we bring it all in and you can't pay us, then I'm going to lose a lot of money. And he couldn't show me. So I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pull the event. And we did. We lost $75,000 that day, which, to be honest with you, is a lot better than a couple of days later where we would have lost $300,000.
Wow.
It was very humbling. It was very, very humbling. And then my business partner, who I was talking about before at the time, who I loved dearly, was a single mom, and she wasn't in a position to be able to continue. His dead. And she said, listen, Kitty, I can't do it anymore. I want you to do it and create it. I'm going to give you, I'm going to hand it over to you effectively, and you go do what you need to do. And by the way, this folder, you need to sort that out too. And in the folder was another $65,000 worth of bills.
Oh, ouch. That would have been painful.
It was really confronting, and I wasn't angry with her because we'd been trying all these things on the side, and I knew that I hadn't been responsible for the financial stuff. But at the time, I just went, oh my gosh. And anyway, long story short, that piece of land is now what we all know and affectionately refer to as Barangaroo. So it got developed, and it's an incredible space, and all the rest of it. But 5 years after that, I literally stuck my head in the sand for 5 years and just went, how am I going to do this? How do I even begin to get myself out of $150,000 worth of debt? I've got no job. I was depressed. I had anxiety. I wouldn't answer the phone. I wouldn't open letters. I kept moving house and not changing my address. The phone would ring and I'd see silent. It was terrifying. And because I didn't know how to deal with it, honestly, I was drinking and smoking and just suppressing all the feelings, because I'm like, what do you do? And a big part of me again was, well, integrity is really important. And a big part of me was like, well, Kitty, you got yourself into this situation. You got to get yourself out. And bankruptcy for me at the time wasn't an option. I had this kind of story that if I was bankrupt, it would affect the rest of my life. And, it does in some way, but I just like, I'm not doing that. So after 5 years, I started calling the banks.
5 years?
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh God. Oh my. I mean, just the anxiety thinking about what it was like having that over your head, right? I mean, a lot of us do really right now, like now, you know, and I think, oh my God, if I had to kind of, you know, was just in one sense now I'm even thinking about that. I'm like, oh my God, if I had to deal with that for 5 years, I'm like, hold on. You fucking probably, well, excuse my French. Oh my God, I think you probably have been dealing with that for 5 years. No wonder why you're dealing with such a high level of stress.
Yeah. And that is it, you know, that's what we do. We kind of survive it. You know, my way at the time was moving house, and we didn't have the technology like we do now, so it took them longer to catch up with me. And to be completely frank, some of it disappeared because they couldn't find me, and we didn't have the technology, like I said. But the stress on myself, knowing I wasn't facing what I needed to face, and knowing that it wasn't just going to disappear, and that I actually had to transform the situation. And if I didn't transform the situation, then nothing was going to change. And so I really just went, okay, I have to deal with this. And in the beginning, I had nothing to say. I had no money. I had nothing to pay. I had nothing. So I just started picking up the phone and you know, calling the people and opening the letters and just saying who I was, and that I had nothing to report and I had nothing to pay. But could you please just give me some time? Stop calling. Stop email. Stop sending me letters. Just and my mother. I think that was probably a catalyst actually. My mother was getting all of these calls. Kitty, please call these people.
Sorry, I should not laugh. I should not laugh. I mean, you know, it's easy for us, right, in hindsight to sit here and kind of look back at it, but I could just imagine your poor mother.
Yeah, absolutely. She was reputable, and she knew that something was wrong, but she knew I'd withdrawn from her because something was wrong, and she was getting these phone calls because debt collection agencies track you down whoever they can, right? And when you're not in communication, they don't like it. So they call and they say, it's an important matter, please get Kitty to call. And mum calls and goes, someone's calling, they need to talk to you, it's really important. I'm like, so yeah, that was pretty full on, and it was really stressing her out, and it was really putting a wedge further between her and I. And I just, enough, I need to sort this. So yeah, I kept calling, and I just said, you know, I don't have anything to report. I got myself an accounts diary. I started writing in when I was going to follow it up, and the patterns that I noticed, I managed to freeze interest, and you know, then I'd put minimum payments in place, and then you know, I'd come into a lump sum of money at different points. My grandfather passed away at one point, and I got, you know, a small inheritance, and you know, it was about 20 grand, I think, maybe a little bit less, and I used 15,000 of it to settle the debt for less, and I think I was moving or something at the time, but you know, I cleared a whole lot of it for less. And as I started to do it, I started to be able to breathe, and I started to come into myself. And I remember telling myself, or reading Robert Kiyosaki's, you know, Rich Dad Poor Dad at one time, and he was like, the bigger the problem, the bigger the solution. So I had to find a big solution to clear $150,000 debt. And, you know, it really pulled me up. It pulled me into being who I am now, you know, and yeah, so that's how I got into debt and how I got out of debt. And then I had 2 kids, and I sole parented the 2 kids from when my daughter was 10 months old. My son was just shy of 3, until I repartnered a few years ago with a gentleman who I've known for a very long time. But in that time, you know, I was everything for them, and I was trying to make everything work. And about 6 years ago, same time I started the business, started officially helping, like, I'd help people for years and years. I'd help my best friends and different people coming to me that they were upset, they didn't know what to do. And what I saw was the strongest, bravest, most put together people that I could imagine were absolutely in a world of pain, and they were hiding it, and they were doing what I was doing. They were self-medicating, they were pretending everything was fine, they were dodging calls and letters. And, you know, my best friend at the time, we were sitting together, we were preparing a document, we were working together quite intensely for a couple of weeks, and the phone kept ringing, and she kept kind of, I knew the reaction, putting it to the side and like looking around kind of thing. And I said to her one day, I said, what's going on? And she said, she opened up and she told me. I said, give me the phone. Let's call them. She's like, what do you mean? I said, give me the phone. Let's call them. And we called these people. There were 2 or 3 different people, I can't remember now, that were harassing her literally for money because she wasn't answering calls, and they were like, well, you're ignoring me. And the more that she didn't answer, the more they called, and the cycle continues. So I picked up the phone and I called them and I said, you know, this is her situation. This is what's going on. We need 6 months. Can you please back off? We'll be in communication in that time. They said, no, not 6 months. You can have 3. Okay, fine. 3 months is fine. And we got off the phone. I got off the phone, and she literally burst into tears. And I went, you are one of the most together, successful people I know. And if you're going through this, imagine what other people are going through. If this is how you feel, imagine how other people feel. And so, so people kept telling me, my mother in particular, Kitty, you should be doing this as a business, helping other people. I'm like, no way. How am I going to help other people with this heavy, heavy burden? I've been in debt for, effectively 10 years by the time I kind of got into debt and got out of it. A heavy time. How am I going to hold that burden for other people? How am I going to manage that for other people? And so I kept poo-hooing it and did different things and all the rest of it. And then 6 years ago, I ruptured a disc in my neck, and my life stopped, literally stopped. I couldn't, the amount of drugs that they had me on was out of control. Like I couldn't drive, I couldn't parent, I couldn't cook. I can't really cook at the best of times, but I couldn't cook. I couldn't cut a sandwich for my kids. I had to depend on everybody around me. And I just went, no, this happened as a result of the stress and anxiety and pressure I've been through. And if I can stop other people going through what I went through, then I'm going to do it. It's time. And so I reached out and created a system and started, talking to people. And, I actually went and met a girlfriend of mine in the city one day. She was from Wollongong, and she jumped on the train, came and met me. We sat in a restaurant for, 3 hours. She brought all of her accounts. I went through all of them, sat with her, explained what to do with all the creditors, etc. By the time she got home back to Wollongong and me back to my place, she called me and she said, can you talk for me? And I just went, sure. Because I know that pressure, when you're up against it. And, I had that account diary that I said before, and I put in when I needed to call and 2 weeks before because I needed to psych myself up and have the conversations. But, appealing your case time and time again while you work out how to get out or come up with a strategy or, even know what you can do to, stop interest or fees or charges or, how far you can go with the banks. So that takes something to work it out. I've been doing this for 20 years and actively, putting it together in a method of process for the last 6 years. And it takes something. And you also need to fight for yourself and to tell somebody else what you're going through with, and somebody on the other end of the phone really doesn't give a care. They're there to do their job is quite difficult because you're heartbroken and you're trying to share some of the most intimate things that no one knows about you in the world to a complete stranger who doesn't care. And it's really soul-destroying.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things, Kitty, because we're going to spend the next 5 weeks actually breaking down a number of things that you've managed to put together in a system, because just recently you've launched a program where you've been able to create modules that take people through this step by step. But I know you've got a couple of different approaches, right, that you actually give people a place where they can do it themselves by giving them all the modules. But then you've also got, which I also do, I have to say, I think also knowing that you've got the option of being able to do it for people, for those who are, because at the beginning, the thing I want to come back to in this particular conversation for today is that in the first module, one of the things that you deal with is that the conversation around how people who look together and who are together, let's just say, highly smart human beings who just would say to themselves, how can I have got myself into this situation because I'm a pretty smart individual? And the shame and embarrassment is often the first thing that you deal with. And when you're in that space, it can be tough to be the one who makes those calls, right? So even in that situation, it can be very difficult to pick up the phone. So can we just talk briefly about that particular aspect of it and why you found, or what you found with people, and why that's so important in the first step?
Yeah, sure. Admitting where you're at and acknowledging your situation is without a doubt the hardest part, reaching out, asking for help, telling somebody, because I think what we think is that we're meant to have it all together. We're, of whatever age, or we've been to whatever school, or we're from whatever family, and we should have it together. But the reality, like you say, Kylie, is that so many people who are highly, highly successful have ended up in a situation like this, and there's shame and there's embarrassment, there's upset, and there's a whole lot of things associated with that as well. There's financial abuse and, all of the things that happen as a result of people hiding all of these things. And it happens because, let me tell you this first, most of our database, most of our clientele, are highly, highly successful people. Lawyers, accountants, we've got business owners, we've got all sorts of people. And, I believe that it happens, people get into the situation for a multitude of ways. But what I believe also happens is that when somebody actually ends up in a situation, they only look at that situation where they are right then. So, for me, I'll use my example, it's like, you silly, you idiot, you should have known better, you should have put more precautions in place, you should have interrupted it beforehand, not waited till 3 days out from the event, you should have been all over what was going on with the business part, like should have. It's all kind of punishment from the past. Whereas actually when I just went, okay, enough, I'm going to deal with this, I just went, okay, this is where I am. This is where I am, and I can't actually change all of that past stuff. I can just deal with what's in the moment right now. And I started from there. So disconnecting or uncollapsing kind of what happened, and also looking at what happened, like this is something that is really prominent and really important. We were talking about this in the office yesterday. People who are usually, some people don't wake up in the morning one day and go, oh, I got a great idea. I'm going to go and get into a whole heap of unmanageable debt today.
I don't know about that.
No, people say, I want that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you on that, right? Although I do have this kind of interesting thought. It's like, I don't know. I think there's been sometimes I'm like, screw it. I'm going to go and spend a fortune on a new outfit. I'm going to go get myself into some debt so I can look fabulous. But I do get your point, right?
Did you really go, I'm going to go and get myself into debt to look
fabulous? No, that's true.
I'm going to go and get, I need to go and get a new outfit so I look fabulous so I can make money to pay the debt.
Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right.
And that's it. We kind of, in a moment you can convince yourself of anything, right? That's what we do. We're like, oh, well, I'm just going to, and okay. I think that our money stories create part of who we are. I think the lack of education and information that we get growing up creates another one. I think that our circumstances, our environment, trying to please people or make people happy or, buy things or, keeping up the Joneses, even the Joneses are broke, all of that mentality, or having wounds and issues inside of yourself that you have addiction to cover because you're not able to deal with whatever that is. And it's all money related, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex, whether it's drugs, whether it's rock and roll, whatever it is that your addiction is, you cover it with something that has a financial value. So you're blocking the freedom to actually break free from this once and for all. So that's why acknowledging where you are right now allows you the freedom to go, okay, this is where I'm at. As you said right at the top of this call, you can't change the past. You can't. What you can do is acknowledge where you are and take steps to transform here forward. And then start looking at, how come? Why did you make those choices? What is it that you did in a view to transform that once and for all?
Yes.
So shame and embarrassment are there because people also say, oh, you idiot, I can't believe you're going to make that. My mother. Why are you upset?
Yeah, the thing that I'm hearing in what you just said, Kitty, is that it's not that you need to deal with or put your attention on changing the experience or the emotion, but you put your attention on, and that may be part of what you do. But I am hearing that once you start to look at what are the actions that you can start taking to start to deal with the actual problem, which is the root of the problem. And I did read an article the other day, actually, I think it was in Psychology Today, that money as a stressor, it can be considered as the root of all evil. Like it is at the root of what causes a lot of all the other stress. So, I'm present to the despite how you feel about it, or despite all of the conversation we have with ourselves about it, that when we start to look at some of the smaller actions, that like just taking one small action at a time is the way forward.
Absolutely, 100%. And literally that's all I did. Like I only know looking back that I was in 150,000. When I was at the time, I just was one thing at a time. One letter, deal with it, put it aside, put it away. Next one, and it wouldn't necessarily flow on like that. And to be completely honest, at the time, I didn't add it up because it was terrifying. It was terrifying. It was like, oh my goodness, okay, that's a huge number. How am I going to deal with that huge number? I'm not. I'm going to break it down into little tiny bits and I'm going to deal with it like that. So, the other thing about this, Kylie, is that when people are stressed and anxious and don't know what to do and they can't see a light at the end of the tunnel, they just can't see it. They don't know where it is. They don't even know which direction. They've spun around so many times that they're not sure which direction they're facing. They've got such anxiety or stress, like, oh my God, how's it going to be? Like this. And when you're in that state, no oxygen goes through your brain. And when no oxygen goes through your brain, you cannot think of a solution. So it's not that you don't want to, you can't. So what we do and what we teach people to do is stop that. Like, stop all of the calls, stop all of the letters, get in communication, know what it is that you're asking for so you can get some peace of mind. Because, when you go for a walk on the beach and you're not interrupted, you've got no distraction, you come back and you're like, I can breathe. And then you can think clearer and ideas drop in as to what it is that you're meant to be doing or how you're meant to be going, etc. It's the same here. You can't create solutions when you're anxious or when you are on edge that the phone's going to ring or whatever that looks like. So stopping that to start with, and then once it's stopped, going, okay, I've got some breathing room. Now I'm going to look at what my situation is, where I can make some money, what I can do about my, what alternate solutions are there, who am I being? Do I actually need to go and see somebody and talk through what's going on and complete something from the past so that I can actually have freedom? Do I need to go and restudy? Have I not been able to study? Have I not been able to generate more money because I'm stuck in this vicious cycle of trying to pay for something? Like, when you can actually give yourself that pause, that moment, then you can start to see and you can start to think. And especially, when you talk to, that's what we really do. We get in people's worlds and we work out, what their potential recoverable position is, what strategies they can put in place to action it, how they can talk to the banks and how they can get the solution. So not only do you get the breathing space, but once you've done that, then you're looking at, okay, what are the solutions? What are the strategies? How am I going to implement that? What am I going to put in place to manage myself? What structures am I going to put in place? Am I going to have a reminder every whatever? Or, what do I need to do to make sure I fulfill on utilizing this time and clearing myself and getting myself out of the situation?
It's fantastic. I mean, I'm already present to the opportunity of breathing, because just as you were saying all that stuff about the oxygen, I was like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I've kind of been through that one. And in some extent, still dealing with that, right? So just before, one of the things that I want to finish on today, Kitty, because I want to be able to give people a sense of, because we're going to keep talking in the next 5 weeks about each of the various aspects of the work that you do in order to take people through this journey. So in between each of these sessions, what we're going to do is give people a couple of things to go take an action on. Before we do that, at this point, I do want to let people know that if this is occurring to you as something that that you can see that you need to start doing something about, I am going to recommend at this point, go and look for the link in the show notes. We've got a link in there directly to this 5-module online program that Kitty's called, believe it or not, called Breathe Easy, and something about breathing, right? We'll come back to that. But go to the show notes, open the link, check it out. It is a program where you can get taken through the steps so you can do exactly what Kitty's saying. Now, if you're a little uncomfortable and going through it all by yourself, you can also hit on the link to reach out to Kitty, and her or her team will give you the information about what you could do to work with them if you feel like you need somebody else to help you work through that. Take that action now. And then now, Kitty, what I'd like to do is just before we close off today, I want to hear about two things. One is, in between today and the next session we talk about, which is going to be about the second module, what are some of the key things that you'd recommend people who are right at the beginning of the journey? What is maybe 1 or 2, no more than 3 actions you would suggest people do immediately?
One of the things I would suggest that you do immediately is look at, just start getting back in control of your money. We were talking about this yesterday as a team, and the first thing that pops to my mind is, do you actually know where your money's going? Do you know what direct debits are coming out of your account? Do you know when things are due and payable? Do you know that you're going to have, do you have a structure in place to actually manage that the money's going to come out, and when the money comes out that you actually aren't going to get a bounce fee, because that's like a ridiculous amount as well. So do you know what's happening with your accounts? That's one.
Now, before you go to the second one, ladies, I'm going to put myself on the line here and deal with the shame and embarrassment of what I'm about to say. But if you do not know the exact figures on your mortgage, your electricity, your gas, if you're at home as a mother and you're not now no longer the current breadwinner and your husband is predominantly contributing to that, and let's face it, you may have gone through a number of refinancing situations. Of course, you can hear that I'm repeating my experience over the last 5 years. And if you do not know what the breakdown is between your principal loan, your interest loan, the total amount of payment, the total amount on average that you're paying for gas and electricity, that as a micro action, when Kitty says go find out where the money is, it doesn't matter if you're not the primary breadwinner right now, you need to know that stuff. So if that's you, my invitation is that this week you go get flat. And I understand that could take a week for you because you're going to have the conversation, get the papers out of the filing cabinet, follow up and make a phone call. But come next week, having accomplished those actions by getting those specific numbers. Thanks, Kitty. Next action. What do you say?
Beautiful. So I have so many things that I want to say. My mother was in the situation that you're talking about. She handed everything over to my father when her mother passed away and left her an inheritance. My father had no clue. He was young. He didn't have a clue. And he was an entrepreneur and, ended up losing the money. And my mother, by the time she realised what was going on, we lived in multi-million-dollar houses in the eastern suburbs and moved to a 3-bedroom townhouse on a train line in Wollstonecraft. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that she had no idea that all of the money was gone. And he was remortgaging properties without her knowing, etc. So, knowing where you stand is absolutely crucial,
100%.
And it's very, very important. The other thing I just want to add on the shoulders of what you said, Kylie, is know your interest rates.
Right.
If you have credit cards, we're all very easily, get a 50-month interest rate. That's all good and well if we pay it. But if we don't pay it, you're looking at 29.99% interest, which is absolutely out of control.
Yeah.
So know your interest rate and work out what your interest rate is actually costing you. And, I'm happy to provide you an interest rate calculator. If you want to reach out, we can give you one of them. You can find them online, but we'll
put it in the show notes. Hey, Kitty, we'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And work out where you actually stand. The other thing I want to offer is and I'm going to have to get this to you, Kylie, but a copy of a statement of financial position, right? So know where you stand financially. Have a look and be brutal with yourself. Look at how much you've got coming in, how much you've got going out. And when you look at that and you actually understand how much there is coming in and how much there is going out and what your debts are costing you, you're going to get the raw truth. Now, when you do this, make sure that you have a look overall and you see that you incorporate everything from, the staples that you get or the stationery you get for the kids or the barbecue gas, like everything you put in, make sure you build in a contingency as well. If you're getting electricity bill and the electricity bill is like, I don't know, $700 one quarter and $900 the next. Put in $900 a quarter into this
right,
so that you can see how much money you need a month, because things come at you monthly or quarterly or annually, so we don't really know unless we put it all into one place. So, it can be really confronting, and I just invite you to take the steps to get yourself back in control. Have a look at where you stand, because if you're going on a trip and you're planning a trip to go to Greece when you can, you've got to know
please.
You got to know where you're starting.
Yes.
Where you book your trip from.
Yes.
To go to Greece and you're going from Sydney or you're going from Japan, it's going to be a completely different situation.
That's fantastic. So, okay, we've got a set of actions, I think, a lot for people to take on this week, and we're going to include the links to everything that we've just referenced inside the show notes so that you don't have any concern about where to go. We're going to make it very easy for you. And then, Kitty, just a brief highlight on what's in store for us next week. What's the topic we're going to look at next week?
Okay, so next week we're going to talk about stopping the noise.
Stopping the noise. What does that mean?
So looking at all the things that get in the way of you being present, looking at what is it that you can look at. Actually, no, sorry. We're not going to do that. I'm a week ahead of myself. We're actually going to look at what your options are.
Oh, okay, fabulous.
We're going to look at what your options are in relation to how you can, reset yourself, or what options there are, anything from accessing more credit to options available for you to actually create that breathing space, etc. Right. To bankruptcy and what bankruptcy looks like as well. So
fantastic. Oh my God, I'm already excited. I'm trying to jump ahead without even having gone and done the actions. So ladies, it's okay. I'm with you. We're all going to do this together. So next week we're going to come back, and then once you've got that info together, you absolutely can see that you'd be ripe for, okay, well now I've got clarity about all this. And it goes, don't worry if you don't get it all done, but come with as best much as you can. And then we'll take a look next week about that conversation. So Kitty, anything else you want to finish off on today before we jump off?
Only just to reiterate about shame and embarrassment and guilt. There's no, we all think, and especially as women, I truly believe that we all feel like we need to take the burden on, or, there's accusations of, you shouldn't have done this, or why did you, and all of that stuff. Again, I just want to reiterate that nothing you've done in the past will change where you are right now. The only thing that will have you create a different life, and let's face it, if nothing changes, nothing changes. The only way you're going to create an alternate future is for you to actually acknowledge where you are and moving forward. And that happens by letting go of any of the grief or the upset. The other thing I want to say on that really quickly is, if you haven't told anyone and you're holding this burden yourself, please get in communication. Reach out to somebody, because when you process things in your head, they often become a lot worse than what they are, and you make yourself kind of bad and wrong, and that you've done all the wrong things, and you make it sometimes more than what it is. And I'm not taking away from the situation. I'm just saying that running it through your head and doing what I affectionately refer to as head miles doesn't help. It perpetuates what you already believe to be the truth about how bad you are about being in the situation.
Yes.
Things happen, circumstances happen, you have an accident, your relationship breaks down, you lose your job, COVID hits, a global pandemic, who knows, things happen. And then what we tend to do is cover it up with all of this other stuff, drinking or smoking or shopping or gambling or whatever, because we can't be with that. And then we find ourselves in trouble.
Yeah, spot on. So a couple of things. So be kind to yourself, and you are not alone. And even if you are listening to this, and I really do get that we can feel very alone when we're dealing with those emotions. And I want all of you to know that even if that is the case, that you feel like that, I want you to know you're not. We too here know exactly what that's like. And we know that there are many, many thousands of people who are feeling exactly the same thing. And if you don't have the courage right at this point to speak to somebody immediately because you are going through a difficult time, but we are here and we are coming back, and we do, acknowledge it for yourself and let yourself know that you're not alone. Right. And when the timing's right, you will find the right time and the moment to do it. So, Kitty, I'm going to finish, because we're here for 5 weeks. We're not going to do this every week, but I am going to start this first week with asking you to complete a sentence for me. A leader is someone who?
Okay. A leader is somebody who is passionately connected to the cause and unstoppable in the face of what they have to achieve.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for being here today. I do also want to acknowledge that, because I was late, we had to deal with my, I don't know if I can hear it, chances are you guys can hear it, that my cleaner rocked up halfway through the conversation. And so we did have a bit of vacuuming in the background. Thank you for listening beyond what you saw in the background or heard in the background. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for who you are in the world. Kitty, thank you for everything you're doing in order to provide what I think is the foundation for people's ability to express themselves in the world. And I'm really looking forward to next week's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Carly, for who you are in the world. Like, the commitment that you have to take the conversation to the people and what you're doing to make that happen is absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.